At the new Plainfield Backus Emergency Care Center, we're opening new doors to better health. More than just a 24/7 emergency room, the new center provides services you and your family need to get better, stay healthy, and be well. Choose wisely. Choose Backus.
139th House District, and the 139th Health District, and no offense to the candidates running for it, I think turned out to be one of the more unusual designed districts when they recently redistricted. It sort of covers a large chunk of northern Montville, all of Bowser, and then this kind of a jigsaw-like piece through central Norwich, I think. So check, with your registrar or go online to the Secretary of State and see which, if that's your district. Running in that district, we have, to your left, Republican candidate Leon Moore, and the Democratic candidate, the incumbent, Representative Kevin Ryan. Also tonight we have the candidates for the 42nd House District, and under the redistricting, that consists of the eastern section of Montville, all of Preston, and most of Ledyard except parts around the Gales Ferry area. And the candidates for that office, we have the Republican candidate, Mike France, and the Democratic candidate, Timothy Bowles. And that's an open seat. That was the seat held by Representative Tom Reynolds, who made a run for the state senate and did not win the primary, so we have an open seat in the 42nd. So how this is going to work tonight, we're going to give all the candidates a chance for 90-second opening statements, and then we'll get right to the questions, and we'll rotate the order of the questions, and we'll give everyone a chance to comment on those questions, and in some cases, if appropriate, give people a chance to offer a rebuttal. We're going to start with Mr. Moore in the 139th House race with his opening comments.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to thank the day for providing us the opportunity to have this forum today, and for the Montville High School for providing facilities to have it in. My name is Leon Moore. I am an Avery retiree of 20 years, 15 of which was spent in Groton, and 13, I've been a Montville resident for 13 years. I'm married to my loving wife, who is a registered nurse in Groton at a long-term care facility. I have a stepdaughter who's currently attending college in North Carolina, and I have two young sons who are attending public school here. As for what I'm doing now, I'm a volunteer at the Oakdale Fire Department, where now that my pager is active, I will be assisting in calls for fires and EMT related calls. And I am a youth soccer coach for Munchkin Fives for the Montville Rec team. Aside from that, I'm a Montville Rotary member and a member of the Montville VFW Post 10,060. As far as experience, I've had my experience in the Navy as a sonar technician, acoustic analysis, and troubleshoot and repair of electronics. I don't have a whole lot of political experience. I got into the race 2 years ago, and that will probably show through during the forum because I am not a polished candidate. But after 20 years of being in the Navy, I decided it was time for me to try something different. So I decided to try to serve my community in a different way. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Right on time. Representative Ryan.
I too want to thank the Day and Montville High School for hosting this event this evening, and I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. As it's already been mentioned, we probably aren't the most prominent debate this evening, but probably will be just as exciting, I'm sure. My name is Kevin Ryan, and I currently serve as the state representative for the 139th District, as I have for a number of years. Before that, I served on the Montville Board of Education, 5 years as the chairman. I currently teach physics at the University of New Haven, and I have worked in public health and worked in a family business. I look forward to a discussion this evening of the many issues that are important to you, and I believe it's going to include the economy and job recovery, healthcare quality and access, education, and the right and safety of workers. I know I've always been there to listen to my constituents and to respond to their concerns. And as part of what I've done, I've served in various positions at the General Assembly during my time there. I've served as co-chairman of the Labor and Public Employees Committee, and I currently serve as Deputy Speaker. So I look forward to the questions and the discussion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And the 42nd District, starting with Mike France.
Thank you. I would also like to thank the day and Paul Schneer for providing this opportunity for voters to ask questions and hear responses directly from the candidates. My name is Mike France. I'm the Republican candidate for state representative for the 42nd District. As background, I enlisted in the Navy in 1981 and initially served in submarines. I earned an ROTC scholarship, and following graduation served on surface ships before finishing my career as an engineer for the Navy, managing submarine overhaul and repair, and finally new construction here in Groton. While completing the final 2 years of my Navy career, I earned my second master's degree at Eastern Connecticut State University in organizational management. Since retiring as Lieutenant Commander in 2005, after a 20-year career, I continue to serve the submarine community as a defense contractor working on the Virginia-class submarine program. I currently serve as a town councilor in Ledyard and chair of the Finance Committee. In that role, I'm responsible for putting together our town budgets, working with the mayor, Board of Education, superintendent. We have brought forward a budget to referendum without raising the mill rate, maintaining all our town services and the quality of our education. It can be done. The key to successful governance is leadership. I have a proven record over the past 25 years of strong leadership in increasing positions of responsibility. This leadership ability has served me throughout my life, and now I'm asking for your vote on November 6th to send a principal leader to Hartford, representing the 42nd District. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Bowles.
I too would like to thank the day for sponsoring and hosting this event. I think it's critical for the voters to be as knowledgeable as possible about the choices they are making in November, from the top of the ticket all the way down to this local race. I want to also express my appreciation to Mike France for stepping in and running as my Republican opponent. We had a chance to talk a little briefly just before this forum. I have a lot of respect for him. I have respect for anybody who goes ahead and takes on the hard work of running for public office. I see a couple of folks that have had that experience for many, many years as well. Again, my name is Tim Bowles. I have lived in this region for about 35 years plus. My wife Donna, who has gracefully agreed to attend this evening, is here. We have a farm in Preston, raise alpacas. I think the biggest thing that I bring to this campaign is 40 years of public service. I have served the town of Preston anywhere from being a school bus coordinator. I was an emergency medical technician for the Preston City Fire Department. I was elected to the Planning and Zoning Commission in Preston. More recently, I am serving currently my second term. I'm in my fourth year as a selectman in the town of Preston. I have worked in various capacities with the state of Connecticut, including as a legislative liaison at the Office of Policy and Management. I chair the Connecticut Clean Energy Fund. I've been a social worker with a couple of different state agencies, a medical policy consultant. I've had the opportunity to really take a look at the way Hartford can work, does work, and should work. And I believe bringing this experience to this election and your consideration this November, I think is key. I do believe I have the connections.
Can I wrap up, Mr. Bowles, just to make sure?
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll get to our questions. And again, our managing editor, Tim Cotter, if you want to submit a written question, I'll bring it on up. And the first question goes to Representative Ryan. And you were part of the Democratic majority that addressed the $3.5 billion fiscal hole that this state confronted, and the legislature and the governor did so with a large tax increase and also cuts to government, concessions from labor workers. That solutions, face criticism from quarters, so I was hoping you could discuss, why that was the solution and what might be done going forward to keep the budget in balance.
Okay, thank you. It's true, we did begin this legislative session with a $3.6 billion deficit. It was determined that we would make the required changes to the budget, because we do have to have a balanced budget, by making taking half the $3.6 million and making cuts of that amount in the budget, and then finding other revenue sources to make up the other difference. A lot of the cuts were very, very difficult. A lot of programs had to take a step back. We've heard from a lot of folks who feel that some of the services they were providing would be eliminated or be detrimentally affected. As you mentioned, the workers, the state employees did take concessions. The state legislators took concessions as well. As we gave back some pension aspects as well as some healthcare aspects, and some people took some time before they would get any kind of pay relief. Some of the cuts we made, we took a number of agencies and we cut, I believe, went from 80 to like 51 different agencies as one example. And something we'll probably have to look at to do in the future, is we have to come back and look for more cuts. We also wanted to maintain some revenue sources, because one of the things we didn't want to affect is we wanted to maintain the financial help that we give the towns, especially through the ECS funding. We didn't want the towns to have to turn around and tax their citizens to make up for whatever the state didn't give them. So we at least maintained level funding for the town and pilot money, like I said, ECS funding, TAR money, things of that nature, so the towns wouldn't be adversely affected and people wouldn't feel an effect on their property taxes in that regard. There was a lot, as you know, there's always a lot of hard decisions that have to be made whenever you look at a budget of this size. We have to maintain services to some of the most helpless people in our constituency. Probably number one are the people who are in nursing homes. They are the number one cost. The largest portion of our budget goes to those folks who need help, followed by education, and of course, help to the towns. About 15% of the state budget does go to towns to help them fund their services that they provide to their community. I'm not sure, is there a time limit here?
No, but, if I could ask the candidates, to be fair and to get to more questions, to try to at least be succinct. Mr. Moore, the representative's opponent in this race in the 139th, were you satisfied with the mix of tax increases and cuts in spending, or might you propose a different approach if elected?
Well, I can't say I truly agree or disagree. I'm not happy about what happened, but I was not in a position to have the knowledge or the data that supported the cuts and stuff that were made up in the legislature. The fact that the state received a $2.6 billion tax increase over 2 years on just about anything you can name, that's a tough pill to swallow. I understand we were and are in financial straits right now. And that being said, what's been done has been done. I can't fault them completely for what they did, because they did what they felt they had to do at the time. I don't agree with it. I would like to have seen other stuff done, but I did not have the information I had. As far as going forward, I really think we need to, as I've said before, hold the line on the spending we have up in the state. We've already levied a huge tax on the state. We need to stop raising taxes if we can, and wait for the economy to improve and hold down the spending so we're not taxing the state again. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of housekeeping points before we move on for the candidates. If you could perhaps share the mic and move it a little close to your mouth. People say it's not picking up in the speaker system. And the camera's over there and the audience is out there, so if you don't look over at me, I won't be insulted. We want to make sure we get you on the camera. Okay, so the same question for the candidates in the 42nd District, starting Mr. Bowles. Did you agree with the approach that was taken to solve the large deficit problem? and what might be your approach if you were elected?
I guess my reaction to that question is that, to the credit of the governor and to the legislature as a whole, they spread the pain. As Kevin Ryan just suggested, there was an equal amount, relatively speaking, of cuts and revenue increases, which was necessary to go ahead and cover the gap that was created by previous administrations. I think nobody was happy, and I think that's kind of the beauty of what did occur, that everybody felt a little bit of the pain and shared that pain. I think we continue to have tough times, and I think we will have to continue to resort to that kind of strategy in dealing with the economic problems that we have. Specifically in terms of what we can also do, I think, and if I'm elected, what I would be a strong advocate for are two things. One of which is greater government efficiency. Having worked in 5 different state agencies, it has been my experience that rank and file folks, both in the public and private sector, but in this case the public sector, state employees, have the best ideas in terms of how to go ahead and create better efficiencies. So I would encourage certainly stronger labor management collaborations to go ahead and work together in state government to address issues which can lead to greater efficiencies, better service to our clients, and saving taxpayer dollars. The second thing that I heartily endorse is the direction that's been taken in the last couple of years, thanks to some key legislators in this district, around results-based accountability. And essentially what that is really hold every single program that we have in the state of Connecticut that receives tax dollars and have them be accountable for the money that they spend through a performance-based contracting standard. I think this will continue to evolve. I think there's a lot of national experience on this, and I think that's a way to essentially develop, if you will, a report card on programs, so when the legislature has to determine what programs to cut, they can see in a very quick fashion which programs are actually delivering the results that they're proposing to deliver. So those are two items that I would be supporting.
Great. Thank you. And last crack at the issue of how the legislature approached dealing with the huge deficit and what you might do fiscally if elected, Mr. France.
I think to the premise of the first part, I don't wholeheartedly agree with what happened. I guess it would be the spending cuts were shared, and as Mr. Bowles stated, everybody was unhappy across the board, so it probably was a fairly equitable distribution. I guess I would have liked it better if we hadn't seen a substantial increase in spending. If we held the line on spending and still had the cuts, I think it would have been a better decision. However, when you're looking at a $3.5, $3.6 billion deficit, increased spending almost $1 billion, now you've created a deeper hole than was there to begin with. I think the principled position would have been to hold the line on spending and then figure out how to fill the hole. And that wasn't what was done. I think the other thing that I didn't agree with was how that hole was filled. The creation or expansion of 77 different individual taxes that, and 20 of those 77, 20 were new, I think was not an honest way for the legislature to deal with the public. It's straightforward when you raise income tax, when you raise sales tax. That's a straightforward way to be honest with the public. When you start creating use taxes, like when the lady goes to get her hair done, now we have a 10% tax on that. I talked with 2 beauticians in my district, and they say, say you charge $30 for a haircut, now they're going to charge $33, but that beautician still gets, or hair salon still only gets $40. She gets a $10 tip before, now she only gets $7. So who's really paying that tax? It's not the consumer. It's that small business owner, and their least can afford it. So I think that is where I disagree with the process of how that hole was filled. I think that the legislature needs to be more direct and more honest. And if you're going to be increasing spending, you ought to be taking it out of something that is straightforward with the public, such as sales tax or income tax, and then stand up and defend that position. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And Mr. France, you get the crack at the second question, which has come up at other forums and frequently comes up in our meetings when we talk to local selectmen and mayors, councilors, and that's the state's prevailing wage law, which requires for any municipal project of any size that the contracts be awarded to someone who agrees to pay the prevailing wage, which is basically a union level wage. And so the question for you, Mr. France, do you think this is a good provision? Would you amend it in some way or repeal it? Mr. France?
I would say in general, I do not agree with a mandated wage. So the prevailing wage law on its face is not a fair and equitable way. If you have a free market approach, the wages will be set by the contractors that are coming into bid. You have an open bid process. The contractors are not going to bid a project for less than what they can earn on that project. So I think the prevailing wage law on its surface, all it does is increase the cost of projects to municipalities. And I think it's unfair to them to actually have to do that. And I think the better way, the free market allows a municipality to put out for bid, allow contractors to come in based on the wage in that region. If you come to, even in Connecticut, you have a diverse region of cost between the western side of the state, southeastern Connecticut, Hartford region. The cost of living is different in each one of those areas. So why would you require and mandate that the prevailing wage be applied across the board? I think that is not an equitable way to face projects. And it disincentivizes, or not it damages and hurts municipalities trying to pay for that.
All right, thank you. And your opponent, Mr. Bowles?
I have to
take the mic, just kind of.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have to very strongly support the notion of prevailing wages. I think one of the things that's happened in this economy is that working men and women, families in this district, in this state, and across the country have suffered tremendously. The deepest pain, economic pain that's been faced by people have been in the middle class. And I think it's imperative that we do everything we can in terms of economic strategies to keep a living wage intact. It is very, very difficult to go ahead and support a family right now with less than, with a very small minimum wage, with less than the prevailing wage. And I think out of respect and out of a deep compassion for people that are trying to make a living, trying to pay a mortgage, trying to go ahead and put children through college, I think it's critical that rather than try to dummy down or drive down wages, we need to do everything we can to support a basic living wage for every working person in the state of Connecticut. And I would not yield on that particular position. Thank you.
And next up, Mr. Moore, on the question of the prevailing wage provision.
Thank you. As far as, can you hear me okay?
Can you hear him on that mic?
Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, sorry. As far as prevailing wage is concerned, I understand I'm not completely familiar with how it works. I do know it is applied to work that is done at on municipalities and other government buildings, that if the cost reaches a certain level, it automatically goes to union workers or union facility. And right now, my understanding is that it hasn't been adjusted in many, many years. I don't remember the exact time it was last adjusted.
Early 90s, I believe.
I believe so, yes. And if we were to keep prevailing wage, it would have to be adjusted for the times. But as far as what Mr. France had to say, I also believe in the free market. We need to be able to allow our municipalities to barter for a better price on a thing so they can save their money, their state funding, their property taxes for that area, so they can apply it to other programs like schools and other infrastructure work that they have to do in their towns, instead of spending it a higher amount because of prevailing wage than they need to. They're strapped enough as it is. Why add more burden to them because of a prevailing wage?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Ryan.
Thank you. I do support the prevailing wage because it ensures that working people, the people that have to go out and live and pay taxes like everybody else, aren't in any way penalized because they're working for a municipal, federal, state, or municipal government. The prevailing wage is not a union wage. It is determined by the federal government on a regular basis. And the prevailing wage within the state of Connecticut is actually lower than the states around it. New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island all have large, greater prevailing wages. And the state itself is divided into regions by the federal government to kind of take into account. They gather the information on what's being paid in that locality and then determine what the prevailing wage for the various occupations will be for that job. As chairman of the Labor and Public Employees Committee, we had someone come in who had done a study. And contracts done under the prevailing wage didn't cost any more than those that weren't. If there any difference, it was negligible. So it ensured that the quality of the work was there, that people were getting paid, were being fairly compensated, they could live in the area in which they were working. And like I said, it's not a union wage, it's determined by the federal government on a regular basis and assessed on that basis. And it's not that the contracts are given to folks who agree with it. If you accept the contract, you have to pay the prevailing wage.
Thank you. Okay, quick, we'll run to another question, and we begin with Mr. Bowles in the 42nd District race. And the question I received is on jobs. It's obviously a big issue. The state got a unpleasant surprise with the last unemployment number at 9%. What would you propose? What would be your priorities in trying to improve the economic situation in Connecticut and create jobs? Ms. Bowles.
I think my response to this really has to do with we need more jobs. And I think in this political campaign, you've heard that from both Republicans and Democrats at the top of the ticket all the way down. I heartily endorse that. But what I bring to the table is, and what I have been proposing for the last 6 years in southeastern Connecticut, which would impact all 3 towns in this district, Montville, Ledyard, and Preston, is the creation of a Connecticut Clean Energy Center at the site of the former Norwich State Hospital property. I have for 6 years been proposing this. I believe the day has endorsed the concept at one point in time. The difference now with this proposal is that with the experience that we are having now with Jackson Labs, the medical facility that's moving from Maine down to Farmington, is we have a model where a public and private partnership has gotten together to create a biotech cluster in Farmington associated with the University of Connecticut. I believe with that model, with the governor that we have currently, with the legislature that we have in office currently, and hopefully after November, that we can go ahead and create the same kind of public-private partnership together with, I would propose, the University of Connecticut and Yale University to create a renewable energy cluster at that site, which would involve research and development, light manufacturing of green technologies. Solar thermal would be a good example of that, together with some specific job training for young people to get into the green energy field. I feel that has a lot of promise. I think it has a great potential, and I believe I have the connections and experience as former chair of the Connecticut Clean Energy Fund to try to bring this to fruition. I would work very closely with local government officials and together with the Preston Redevelopment Agency and my colleagues in the legislature to see us move forward in southeastern Connecticut. We desperately need an economic jolt in this region to create jobs. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And Mr. France, the topic of jobs, economic growth.
Well, I agree with Mr. Bowles that jobs are the key. I disagree on the approach. I think the reason that we have a problem in Connecticut, southeastern Connecticut in particular, it deals with tax policy. We've always had relatively high taxes in our state, but we used to have an economy that worked. What's the difference? The difference is that our taxes have become unpredictable. So how is a business supposed to know year in and year out whether to grow, whether to stay or not? What we've seen in the last 18 months is about 17,000 businesses close their doors or leave the state. Why is that? Well, in the last several years, we've seen taxes go up year after year. We even saw 2 years ago where the tax were raised mid-year and backdated to January. So how is a business in that kind of climate supposed to predict year to year what their expenses are going to be? If you want a business to start up in this state or anywhere, as a small business, you have to have capital. Now, you have two choices essentially. First is to either go to a bank, mortgage your house, or go to private investors. But either way, you have to have a 5 or 10-year plan on how you're going to become profitable. Now, after personnel expenses, cost of regulation and cost of taxation are two of your major expenses. If you can't predict that, even a year to 2 years out, how do you expect to put a 5 or 10-year plan together and draw investors in? So I think the key is a stable tax policy. Why the green energy idea Mr. Bowles advocates for the North State Hospital is a good one. We've seen at the federal level some of the pitfalls of some of those projects. In many ways, government is the least capable of being able to assess what business is going to succeed or not. Governor Malloy has taken the first 5 and now the first 15. So essentially what the government in Connecticut is doing is saying, I like you 5 over there, but the rest of the businesses in the state, you fend for yourself. I'm going to give you advantage to those 5 companies. Now, the Jackson Labs, it would have been nice if that had been done in time that Pfizer didn't have to move up to Cambridge to move some of the research up there. If we're going to create a research facility, it would have been nice to be done on the Pfizer campus instead of up near UConn. I heard people that advocated for that particular spending of $370 million. Well, they're hoping that it's going to create a corridor between Boston and New York, and they're going to stop along the way in Hartford. I think that's a bad decision to hope with $370 million for tax dollars.
If I could ask you to kind of
Sure.
Summarize.
Yeah, I think in summary, I think it comes down to tax policy. So, we used to have a state that did well, even though we did have high taxes. But the key is having a legislature with principles and leadership and living within our means, and having a consistent tax policy that businesses can understand and do business in. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Ryan, the topic is jobs, economic growth. What can be done?
Well, I think today's the 4th anniversary of the top legislation from the federal government. And that was to bail out the banks, and the banks are supposed to take this money and kind of redistribute the wealth, if you will. Well, they didn't do that. So that means a lot of businesses in this state and others couldn't get the funding like Mr. France said they needed to kind of expand their businesses, to do the basic type of business they typically did by having some kind of a credit line so they could do that. Well, we passed a job creation bill last October. It did include the first 5. It helped major companies as well as helping small companies get some of this money that they need to kind of expand in the state. Of course, it's contingent on the number of jobs they produce, but it is an important first step, supplying some of the resources that companies do need so they can expand in the state. We've also done a lot with education, trying to retrain people for the jobs that are in the state. We've had manufacturers in the state saying we have jobs, but we don't have the people with the capabilities to be able to perform those jobs. So we've done more in the way of occupation for doing that. We've also given tax credits for folks who are willing to take people from veterans, DEMAs, people who have gone through programs there and trying to get back into the workforce, people who have come off some of our human service programs. We want to get back into the workforce to become profitable, if you will, citizens, paying their own way. So we've also done some things in that regard to get some of the programs there. Now, one of the things you talked about with what we should have done in the last budget, one of the things we didn't do was eliminate a lot of these job training programs that enabled people who typically wouldn't get attempt at getting a job, such as the Job Funnel program in Hartford. Again, programs that brought people off the streets, trained them so they could go into jobs so they could support themselves and their families. So these are some of the things we're doing. I think there's a lot of other elements to the job bill we did last legislative session that we're going to continue to work on to do what we can to perform. Of course, all of us are disappointed with the unemployment numbers, but I can only think of one thing. Today, you know that Connecticut and New Jersey both took 2 different tacks in resolving their budget problems. Well, today, unfortunately, a company outside of Hartford laid off 52 people. That same company in New Jersey laid off 72 people. So there isn't any real safe way to be sure that either method is going to work conclusively. We have seen some progress here with the method we're using, but just cutting taxes and slowing the budget isn't an effective approach either, as demonstrated by this company today.
All right. And Mr. Moore, on the topic of economic growth, job creation, what you would pursue if elected?
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what's been put up here. I agree with Mr. France on a lot of what he said. And with some of the stuff that was done these last 2 years in the state to maintain training programs, but to go on a slightly different approach. As far as the unemployment is concerned, I would like to see more accountability in the unemployment services area. When I retired from the Navy, I was offered or allowed for about 2 months to collect unemployment until my retirement check kicked in. During that time, the only requirement I had after initially filing was to basically call in to an automated phone line, answer 10 questions, yes or no, and that was it. I was never audited. I was never asked if I was out looking for a job. And I've talked to several other people who, when they retired or they were out of work for a period of time, had the same circumstances where they were not required to show any work for it on trying to get a job. I would like to see opportunities for people who are unemployed or in other social programs to work for or volunteer in lieu of or with their unemployment checks that they receive for nonprofit organizations in the state that right now are being taxed because there's so many people asking for those services. We have a pool of people who are able-bodied trying to find jobs. That would give them a reason to get out and do something for the community and would get them in the workforce so prospective employers could see them, see their work, and they would have a reference and a chance to get a better job.
Mr. Moore, if we could kind of close on that point, thank you.
That'll do it. Thank you.
And the next question goes to you, and it's from our audience. And the question is, what is your position on the push to tie teacher evaluations and tenure to student scores on standardized tests? Mr. Moore.
I have absolutely no issue with that whatsoever. A teacher's job, a teacher's goal, what they're up there, he or she is up there to teach the students, to instill them with the knowledge they need to go beyond school, into college, and out into the workforce. And if that individual, if they're, I feel that their evaluations should be tied to that because that's their job. Aside from grading tests and everything else that goes with that, I don't see an issue with that at all. That's, to me, that's a common sense thing. It's their job. Thank you.
Thank you. And Representative Ryan.
I think it can be one of the elements in a teacher's evaluation, but it shouldn't be the predominant element. Because it's been shown by studies that in reality, that what a teacher does this year might not be reflected on a standardized test for a couple of years. So that, I mean, when the teacher might be doing a job teaching the student, but again, that won't show up, like I said, for a couple of years on a standardized test. I think there's a lot of other elements. I think while we did some great things with the education reform bill this year, there seemed to be a preponderance of concern that we had just a ton of bad teachers throughout our classrooms throughout the state, and that was the cause of our problems with education. And that's not to say that there aren't some teachers that could use some improvement. But I don't think, I teach at a college, I see a lot of fine students from Connecticut who are making it through and doing very well in my class. So I think the fact of the matter is, while that could be a component, it shouldn't be the overriding. I think what the teachers do, the kind of work the teachers do in the classroom, how they work with the students, I think there's a lot of other elements that have to be taken into consideration as part of a teacher's evaluation.
So just to clarify, you do support in some fashion the concept of tying tenure and employment to an evaluation of performance, but not necessarily just a standardized test. Am I getting? Okay. Thank you. Mr. France.
I would say I agree with tying student performance to tenure, but I think that the challenge is, as Representative Ryan points out, standardized testing is not necessarily the best way to figure that out. There are indicators that it is a delay in what happens this year to next. I think the best way to do this is to have both the teachers and the representatives, staff together to figure out what the best way and come to a decision on what the best way to evaluate a teacher is. But it's one of the few areas where they're not evaluated. A few jobs in the country we're not evaluated. Almost every job that you do, you have an evaluation, whether it's formal or informal. And if you don't perform, you're let go. It's one of the few areas in the world of employment that it's very difficult to let a teacher go. And I think that the challenge, though, is to make sure that it's perceived by both the teachers and the parents and the residents at large that it's fair and equitable, it's measurable and objective, and that it is something that is transferable across school districts. That is a very challenging task, and I think that the right way to go about it is to have the groups that are affected by it, administrators, teachers, representatives that represent the people, together to figure out what the right evaluation process is.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Bowles?
Actually,
Take the mic.
Oh, yes, sorry. Actually, on this point, I do agree to some degree with all three of the candidates that have just talked about this. One of the things that I am concerned about is an increased perception that the teachers are somehow the enemy, that the public sector workers, teachers specifically across this country, somehow are deserving of some attacks on them, on their profession, on their performance. And I have to believe, and the teachers that I'm familiar with, and I happen to belong to the American Federation of Teachers as a retiree, that there are a lot of dedicated teachers out there. To Mr. Francis' point, I do agree that we need to have more of a partnership, particularly with parents. We have to get parents more involved in student education. There is a program currently underway in, I think, about 6 different states called the Core Curriculum. And I know very little about it, I have to say, but the little I do know about it, it is a very promising way of kind of getting away from the standardized testing as a way of evaluating teachers and really creating across the states that are participating in this core curriculum a way of educating students in core, as it says, core curriculum, so that a student that's moving from a district to a district or from one state to another state has some basic educational background behind them. I would like to know a little bit more about this. Again, it sounds very promising. As I said, 5 or 6 states have endorsed this. So I think there are other ways to go ahead and proceed with this rather than strictly, and I think all 3 of us, or all 4 of us agree, that the strict evaluation based on standardized tests is not the way to go. I do believe teachers are evaluated, but again, I think we need more of a collaboration, more of a partnership between parents and teachers in our school systems. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next question is going to Representative Ryan, the 139th district race, and the question from our audience is, what specifically have you done to try to aid Preston in the redevelopment of the Norwich Hospital property, and more generally, is the state doing enough to assist in that effort in Preston? And Representative Ryan.
Well, I think we did allow the city of Preston to purchase the property from the state. We did make an attempt to sell the property on our own. When that didn't work, the town of Preston wanted to become involved and purchase the property, which we allowed under certain conditions, and we're working with them in that regard. They have been able to get grant money to do some of the remedial work that has been required on the property to put it in a condition that would either make it usable for somebody to develop or sell it at some level. So I think in those levels we've been able to help, first of all, by giving the land and then providing them with some of the resources they need to put the land and the property in a position that it can be used in a way that will be determined by the citizens of Preston.
Thank you. And Mr. Moore, obviously you're not in the legislature, but on the topic, is there more the state can be or should be doing to help the development at Norwich Hospital?
To be honest with you, I not going to drag on the debate to answer, because I honestly do not know much about it. I'm more than happy to look into it, but right now I won't drag the debate on, rambling on. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bowles, I think you talked about some of your ideas, but you know, perhaps what's been done so far.
Let me get the mic. Thank you. Yeah, I think I was fairly clear before in terms of my proposal. I do think the state has really stepped up, the governor's office in particular, the Office of Economic Development and other state agencies, in really assisting our town. And the selectmen of Preston, I have firsthand knowledge of the efforts that are being made in conjunction with the Preston Redevelopment Agency, particularly around the cleanup. I think the state walked away from this property many years ago. I think they were derelict in their responsibility under previous administrations to do their due diligence in terms of making sure that this essentially brownfield site was adequately cleaned up. There are a lot of people in Preston that did not believe it was the right decision for us to purchase the property. I certainly had those discussions a lot. I facetiously indicate that maybe we should put it back on eBay for $1 and get our buck back, but nonetheless, I think we have spent too many state resources on this. I do believe that the next phase, and again, I give a lot of credit to the Preston Redevelopment Agency, to the governor's office, and to other state officials, including the current legislature, in assisting our town in the cleanup. I think the next major phase in this tough economic climate is to really bring people together, and as I will repeat, I believe the development, and as we saw through the request for proposal process that we underwent last year, is that there is a lot of interest in renewable energy projects in southeastern Connecticut, and I think we need to capitalize on those. And I would certainly want to work, if I elected, with my colleagues in the legislature and the governor's office in seeing that come to fruition for the benefit not only of Preston, not only the district, but the whole southeastern Connecticut and the state.
Thank you. And Mr. France, your evaluation of the state's performance up to this point, and what more, if anything, might be done to help the development of that property?
I agree with Mr. Bowles on the dereliction at the state level. In 10 years, the state had the property, and it was one of many properties the state has. It certainly had no vested interest in this particular property over any other. So certainly that showed in their action. I think that this shows a principle that I hold true. I believe that the local town at the level is a better place to manage a project. They have a vested interest in the success. So Preston taking on this responsibility, I think, is evidence of that principle being in action. The town elected and appointed the Preston Redevelopment Agency. I think they've done a good job. There have been a couple of projects that have not come through, and a couple of those projects both had within them that those companies would clear and mediate the environmental hazard. The process Preston Redevelopment Agency is doing now to clear that hazard will make that property more viable to more companies, more projects. I don't necessarily disagree with the green energy ideas. I think that is certainly something that the future holds and would do well. The challenge I see is just the way that those projects have been managed to date. Generally, they have to be incentivized in large part by either state or federal money, and there is no driving market yet that makes it profitable. So I have a challenge with that particular position. However, going back to the principle, I think it is a principle of local government handling what happens in their area as opposed to Hartford or Washington, D.C. telling us what to do with our property.
All right, thank you. Ms. France, the next question goes to you. During the past legislative session, there was a early prisoner release program with prisoners given credit for pursuing an education, for good behavior, with the idea that they'd have more chance of being productive on the outside and reduce recidivism. There's been criticism since of the program because we've seen some violent ex-offenders released and we've seen some tragic outcomes. So the question is your opinion on the early release program. Does it need to be changed? Is it good as it is, or does it need to be repealed? First chance, Mr. France.
The legislation as presented was flawed deeply. I think it was deeply flawed from one major perspective, is that while clearly you don't want to let murderers and people on life sentences out, this went beyond that to allow people who had other crimes against individuals, rape, burglary, other crimes where you have direct impact on people. And I think that those types of crimes should not have been in the same in the legislation there. And I think what we've seen is exactly why those shouldn't have been in there. We've seen 2 people killed as a result of the people being released. I think when you also one of the flaws in the program was it was backdated to 2006, and you didn't really have to perform the activity; you just had to sign up. So there's some flaws there where it allowed people to just, I signed up for it, but there was no room in the class, but I still got credit. And I think that I believe it was about a 75-day window from the time the legislation was filed to the first people went on the street. So I don't think there was a good plan for how they would transition the people that were former prisoners into the public. The results are that we've seen 10% of those people rearrested. As I said, tragically, 2 individuals were killed by people who were released. So I think that the legislation as presented was deeply flawed in those regards. Unfortunately, the amendments that were presented were not addressed or even entertained for a vote. And those that were voted down, I think that some of that challenges it, brings up the imbalance between the 2 parties in the legislature. I think that having one dominant party or the other doesn't drive discussion. It allows one side or the other to make their policies without having to listen to the other side. I think having a balance forces dialogue, forces a balanced approach, and really represents the people better. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Bowles.
I would agree that the early release program needs to be reviewed. I think, like a lot of other legislation that's enacted, I think there's constant need for refinement, review. That's one of the reasons that we have sunset and review panels on legislation and programs. But I would like to take this opportunity to offer another perspective on this. Instead of taking a look at what's happening to prisoners when they're in prison or contemplating an early release program, let's take a look at the amount of money, the amount of resources that we're spending as a country, as a state, as taxpayers in the state of Connecticut on the penal system in the state of Connecticut. It is an inordinate amount of money. It's a huge part of our budget. I think for a civilized country to have the kind of penal system that we have, I think is somewhat outrageous. We're spending an awful lot of money on it. And rather than going ahead and taking a look at the back end of the system, I would like to take a look at encouraging and advocating for more prevention, more preventative programs. One of them I have experience with. I'm on the local interagency service council, which is a collaboration of agencies in southeastern Connecticut that are taking a look at youngsters. I'm talking about juveniles that are entering into the criminal system or about to through misdemeanors or other kinds of offenses. And through juvenile review boards is let's deal with that population right now. My wife and I recently have had an unfortunate experience with a young man. We're foster parents who was involved in that system and is currently actually in the Hartford Detention Center, 14-year-old boy. I think there was a way to intervene much earlier in his life as a society, as a system. I'm talking about wraparound services. I'm talking about us as a community taking responsibility for these young men and women and have them avoid getting involved in the criminal system. Those prevention programs, and I think most of us involved in human services
To be fair, if you could kind of...
Okay, well that's basically it. I think we save money and we improve quality of life for young people if we do that.
Thank you. And Mr. Moore, a question of the early release program.
I agree with the other candidates up here that I do believe it is a flawed plan that was put out, but not to constantly reiterate what they said, because they both had very good points. My question would be, in a more general sense, with what they're doing to let prisoners out early, is that good for the community, or is that good for the state budget? Have we considered in the legislature in Hartford the effects that would have on the community, or has Hartford looked at how it would affect the budget of the state? Thank you.
And Representative Ryan, you get the last crack at this question.
Thank you. This bill is, this program is the same program that 44 other states have. In fact, ours is stricter. The two people that were released that were kind of talked about actually didn't get out because of this program. They got out actually later than they would have under the confines of this program, at a later date, because of some of the circumstances that they came through. But eventually they would have been released. Can we look at this program to make sure that violent criminals don't get out? I mean, certainly we can take a look at it to tweak it to make it more effective to ensure that this doesn't happen. But these are two folks that didn't get out. I heard the recidivism rate of 10%. I've heard a much lower figure than that. That kind of surprised me when I heard that number. But then again, you asked the question, is it good for the people or good for the budget? A few minutes ago, we were talking about some of the tough decisions we had to make. Whatever state service, whether it's in corrections, whether it's with mental health issues, whether it's with our senior citizens, when you make a cut, when you have to make choices, things are going to happen. This seemed to be a pretty effective way of, first of all, taking nonviolent folks and letting them, rather than keeping them in corrections and spending the money there, putting it in programs that are out in the public to be more effectively used there and use our resources at the state level more effectively. Again, I think it's something we're going to go back, look at again to make sure it's working the way it should have worked. But then again, I said it's 44 other states do it, and ours is one of the strictest programs in the country.
All right, thank you. I promised we'd get out of here in time to get home and see I think there's another debate tonight, and we want to give people the opportunity. So we're going to move to our closing statements. Everyone gets a minute to kind of summarize or mention something that we didn't get to, and we're going to start with Mr. Bowles, and we'll go right down the line. Mr. Bowles, closing statement.
Again, I thank the New London Day for the opportunity to discuss the issues with your audience, both here and on tape. I also want to again say I really respect and appreciate my opponent, Mike France, and he is very credible. But I do believe that this election in November is about differences. I think it's very possible, and I trust that we will continue to have civil discourse in terms of talking about the differences that we have. But very clearly, there are differences in terms of this particular election nationally, and as far as this local election in this district is concerned. We have different philosophies, different approaches. I believe in preserving as much as possible the public safety net for those people that are disadvantaged and really having very difficult economic challenges right now. I believe the state has some obligations in terms of those kinds of responsibilities. I do believe that there are ways of increasing government efficiency. And most importantly, I believe I bring the kind of experience in the public sector that can make a difference, that has some influence, and I believe I have an informed knowledge and insight into what can work in the state of Connecticut for the benefit of the citizens of the state and for this district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. France.
I would like to thank all of you for taking time and active interest in the future of our state, and taking time out of your busy schedule to hear firsthand from the candidates. I think the forum that the day has provided is a unique one where you get to make the decision on what questions get asked, and they get hear directly from the candidates, as opposed to the past where it was an editorial board and they, in a couple sentences, summarized our positions and why they endorsed one or the other. I think it shows an indication of how important this election is, and I agree with Mr. Bowles, there are differences. And I think it also shows how serious you are about making an informed decision on November 6th. When Governor Malloy came into office, he said raising taxes was his third option. My response to that is a principled one. If you're willing to raise taxes, you create any budget you want. There's no limit. Even if you have, as he had two other options that he was going to pursue, if you have 10 options, if they don't fall through or your promises aren't kept or whatever happens, all you have to do is raise taxes, and you go back to the constituents and say, well, I told you it was my last resort. I think that you need to start with, certainly with the way the economy has been in the last 4 years, is enough. I've talked to a number of seniors who don't know how they're going to make it to the next Social Security check 8 days later. It's really an interesting perspective when you're standing on a doorstep of a senior who lives on a fixed income, whether it's somebody just on Social Security or is comfortable. No matter where they are, every increase in taxes takes away their lifestyle. They don't have the ability, really legitimately, to go out and increase the money that they have. So it means that they don't buy meat in this one case. What is needed in Hartford, I believe, is
If you could kind of wrap up, thank you.
real quick, I believe common sense, principled leadership, and living within our means is what Hartford needs to do. We do it in our small towns. We balance our budgets. We understand the impact of the tax increase. I think Hartford has forgotten that. I think that balancing budgets without raising tax revenue is what we need to do, and to make the tough decisions on how we do that. Certainly, the impact needs to be felt across and not any one sector to make sure that, as Mr. Bowles said, the public safety net that is there for the most needy is still there, but we don't have excess in the budget.
Thank you. And Representative Ryan.
Again, I want to thank the day for having this forum and allowing you folks to hear this discussion about the issues that are important to you. I've gone from door to door, and it's great to have another venue for where we can discuss these issues, where people can present us with the matters that really concern them. We all want to work to create a stronger Connecticut. We want to create jobs like we did with the Job Creation Bill. We want to work to maintain state and municipalities so there's less of a dependency on the property taxes. We want to create a stronger partnership between higher education and business leaders so our students have the knowledge that they require to be able to get jobs. We want to support education reform that strengthens early childhood education and protects education funding. And we want to protect our seniors in their golden years. These are just some of the things we want to do to make a stronger Connecticut. For many years, I've represented the people of this district. Now it's a little different. It's parts of Montville, Basra, and part of Norwich. And this is an important responsibility. Just as important has been constituent service that I and my office have provided. That is, we help people dealing with state government, state agencies to resolve some problems that they might have. To me, this role has been just as important as representing you in the state legislature. And so that's why I want to continue in this service, and that's why I'm asking for your support this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And final comments from Mr. Moore in the 139th race.
Again, I also would like to thank today Montville High School and the audience for being part of this tonight. As I mentioned when we first started this, experience is something that I'm not, as far as the other thing, and it's not a usual part of closing statements, but I would like to thank all the people who supported me for my run this time, and the one person I would like to thank the most for her support was not able to be here tonight, and that's my wife. Considering this is my last forum, my last debate, I would like to thank her, because if not for her, I would not be the person I am today, and I most definitely would not be where I am right now. I don't know how many times I would have stood up and said, I'm done. It's too hard. No one cares. The people you talk to out there, they seem oblivious to what's going on in Connecticut. I would have given up several times if I hadn't had my wife convince me that this needed to be done, that we need people up in Hartford who are going to do what the people in Connecticut need, not what's been done over the last 10, 15, 20, 30, or more years. Thank you.
Thank you, and a round of applause for our candidates. Thank you. Now I get home.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. That's all. Discussion. Appreciate it.
Differences. Thank you so much for participating. Very good. Very good conversation.